Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. India have won the Women's World Cup for the first time and England are still bad at ODI cricket. Here to discuss that and much more are Wisden Almanac editor Lawrence Booth and Wisden Cricket Monthly editor-in-chief Phil Walker. I don't know if either of you have been watching the Celebrity Traitors, but one of the things that's gained traction there is the big dogs theory about who the traitor might be, and this feels to me like a big dogs podcast.
Oh, nicely done,
myself excluded. But yeah, what I'm saying is, if we were to arrange a cricket journalist traitors, they'd pick one of you two to be one of the traitors just for the good of the game. I think.
Who's Stephen Fry and who's Jonathan Ross? Just to show my knowledge of traitors, I watched one episode.
I saw Celia Imrie did a fart. That's all I know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's literally all I know.
Could have been a
Even my
squeaky
mum's
laptop,
watching this though, and she can't stand anything that's faintly modern. Maybe she's watching it. It's taken over the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway. And we'll come back to who's Ross and who's Fry later on, maybe. So onto the big stuff. India are world champions, and they've done it the hard way. 2 weeks ago, they just lost 3 games in a row and were facing a whole load of questions about whether they were throwing away a golden chance at a home World Cup. They scraped through the group stages, but were faced with the invincible Australians in the semi-final and then needed a world record chase. And somehow, here we are, 150 overs later, and they've won the whole thing. Lawrence, it's some story, isn't it?
Great story. Reminded me, though I know we're not supposed to compare men and women's cricket, but it reminded me of England's men in 2019. They lose group games against Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Australia. Then they win 4 in a row when they have to, and India's women did that. That's tournament play. They peaked at the right time. They beat New Zealand, Australia, South Africa in quick succession, and they did it in front of their home crowd. Is this a game-changing moment? That's the question that everyone's asking. Generally, when the dial shifts in India, it shifts for the rest of the world. We saw that with India's men winning the 1983 World Cup. Suddenly they went from a test nation to a team that were interested in limited overs cricket. The first T20 World Cup in 2007, suddenly the IPL happens, and of course the cricket is never the same again. So the hope now, of course, is that more people in India than already are interested in women's cricket go for it. The WPL has been going for, 3 years now. That's been a game changer. But look, this could simply accelerate the moment where India's women kind of do what India's men have been doing, which is put themselves in a position where they begin most competitions as favourites. We went into this World Cup thinking, who on earth is going to beat Australia? Now, India have kind of almost accelerated the process where for the next tournament we go, who's going to beat India? And it was a great story, wasn't it? From Jemima Rodriguez in the semi to Shafali Verma coming in the final. Dipti Sharma, who, by the way, should have been player of the match. I mean, she gets a 50 and a 5 for in the final, and they're giving it to Shafali Verma. I couldn't work that out. I guess they wanted to give Dipti the player of the tournament and Shafali the player of the match. Anyway, small quibble, but brilliant story, and delighted for women's cricket in India, in specifically, but more generally for the global game.
Yeah, and you're right to pick out the I guess that young core, because I mean Shafali, she's 21 coming back into this, and there's so many individual stories you can pick out. So her, obviously, not picked in the squad originally, comes back in when there's an injury in the final group game, and then plays this knock in the final player of the match in the final. Rodriguez, who was dropped during the tournament, then comes back in and then is put in at number 3 as they reshuffle the batting order around, plays one of the great innings in that semi-final. And Phil, there's almost two amazing achievements in one, isn't it? It's beating Australia and it's winning the World Cup. And when you think to Australia occasionally do lose games of cricket, but the last 2 times they've been knocked out of a World Cup, the team that's done it hasn't gone on to win the whole thing. And this time India were able to go again, even after those scenes at the end of that winning blow in the semi-final when they were basically just all in floods of tears.
Yeah, and that was a really powerful and significant sort of motif, really, that those scenes at the end, because you can't manufacture that. And you sometimes watch men's world tournaments and there can be a weariness to it at times. Here we are again, going through the motions somewhat, but you didn't feel that. You felt like that was the single most joyous moment of all of their lives. That's what it felt like. There were tears everywhere. Harmanpreet, who comes across as quite a kind of flinty, steely kind of character, inconsolable with tears of joy, and those moments, they do leave an imprint, I think, on people's memories and people's hearts and minds, really. And cricket's in a constant battle for hearts and minds. The dial has already, as Lawrence alludes to, it's already shifted anyway. The penny began to drop in India that there's actually quite a fruitful route to take here. If we just give degree of respect to an otherwise neglected form of the game. The 2017 World Cup here was a significant moment that shifted things along. There was really good numbers coming back from India, and I think power brokers started to look at that and realise that this is an untapped market. And crucially, in the end, these are seriously watchable cricketers, and that's the bottom line. There's nothing that is you're not just patronising by allowing it. You're putting this stuff on because this is high class, compelling sport, and that unbeaten 100 from Rodrigue to get them home. And as you told me, I wasn't aware of this, but you told me before we came on air that she's opened up about her anxiety problems, how she's been stuck in her hotel room over the last few weeks and really, really wrestling with herself. I guess the weight of all of that pressure and expectation hanging heavy as it would do on her shoulders. And to come out and play like that is a sporting story that you can't manufacture that. That happens once in a lifetime for that individual. And the sense of scale was really, really strong in that semi-final. As you say, there was always that possibility that it might have been that was their Everest, and then they're going to topple down the other side of the mountain. They kept their cool in the final, and they had the fairy tale with Verma coming back into the team. Made a debut at 15, out the team inexplicably, out the squad inexplicably, called back in due to an injury, and then just adorns the final with a classic knock. She has echoes, and again, the note, we shouldn't compare automatically to men's cricket, but there are aesthetic elements in her game that are very, very Shubman Gill-like. The hands tight into the body, the check drives through the offside, the check drives over the top, everything is quite compact. And she's just a joy to watch. Mandana's one of the most stylish cricketers in the world, has been for a number of years. They bat deep as well. Like Risha Ghosh coming in at 7. If you're looking for like the oceans of difference between, say, India's talent pool and England's rather confused mess of a team at times in this tournament, you look at the players who are coming in at 6, 7, 8 for India and Australia, obviously, compared to the English side, and that's where the real differences lie. In the end, it was quite an interminable tournament at times. The 8-team, everyone plays each other format perhaps needs to be looked at. I think it is being looked at, in fact, for next time round, and for the T20 stuff next year, it'll be different. But overall, it got 2 really, really good semi-finals, I think, and probably a really positive winner in the end for what it means for women's cricket going forward.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that the knockouts have almost done something to save how this World Cup will be remembered.
And how often does that happen as well in cricket tournaments? That you don't really remember all the crap that goes before it. You remember the big moments at the end. It just takes quite a while to get there.
Yeah. But then when you think back to the group stages, you had none of the bottom 4 beating any of the top 4.
Yeah, this is problematic.
You had all the washouts with the sort of confused last-minute scheduling, playing the games in Colombo in the rainy season, and also playing them in the afternoons in Colombo when it tends to be drier in the mornings. There's definitely a lot to improve on, but when you get a final and performances like that, almost doesn't matter too much in a way.
Yeah, the Colombo stuff was a horror show to have to watch though and witness, and the ICC received a lot of pelters, and rightly so, I would say. It's not an easy job organising a cricket tournament in the current climate for obvious reasons, but still, it became a real kind of collective embarrassment. You turn up and you already knew that the game would be basically off, and that was quite painful to watch. Really, I think 4 of the last 8 games were rained off there, and it was quite grim at times, in truth.
Should add that, having said it was a good result for the global game, it would have been a good result had South Africa won as well, because they're yet to win a World Cup. They keep getting to finals. They reached a couple of T20 finals, and now this. They're kind of so close. And don't forget, they were bowled out first game by England for 69, then went on a run, brushed England aside in the semis. Laura Wolfart was one of the stars, well, probably arguably the star of the tournament. Look how many more runs she scored than the next best. 100 in the semi, 100 in the final, for goodness sake. Had Marizanne Kapp reproduced her performance in the final, the one she produced against England in the semi, then they might have had a chance. But she was off.
Strangled down the leg side as well, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's right. So she became a kind of peripheral figure, which South Africa couldn't afford because they already had too many peripheral figures. You know, Anneke Bosch at 3 had a sort of Hall of Fame bad tournament. But look, South Africa will come again, and it's great that they're now in the mix now regularly for these tournaments. It used to just be, would it be England or Australia, with possibly New Zealand. Now India are up there. South Africa, there are probably 4 or 5 teams who could win it. So that would have been good for the global game as well.
Yeah, and you're right to talk about, we should talk about South Africa and touch on Australia as well, but South Africa as the vanquished team. And if you're to compare and contrast what India did with spotting once after they dropped and brought her back, spotting that Rodriguez was in form and that she was their number 3 to kind of transform their campaign, versus South Africa, who had this number 8 and 9 and Chloe Tryon and Nadine de Klerk in brilliant form, but keeping them down at 8 and 9 and then having this either a bit stodgy or just misfiring top 7 outside of Wolfart and Cap and Brits to an extent, that then was leaving them too much to do. And by the final, that was too much in the end. And Australia is interesting because when we were talking in the group, so sort of how do you beat this team, because they were winning some games from, you know, that they had no right to win, you know, from 70 odd for 7 against Pakistan and chasing a world record total against India. And then the other way to look at that in hindsight is that when they do then go on and lose, it's sort of like, were the cracks there? And actually, from the bowling point of view in particular, like to have conceded, you know, 330 twice in the tournament, including this world record chase, that is not what you expect from an Australian side. And I guess sides will be looking at it more generally going forward, that maybe there is a route to beating this team, and that era of dominance could perhaps be just on the way out, at least from, it could be a dominance of 2, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Australia, you probably have to stick them in and hope that you can chase down whatever they set, because they bat so deep that they're, you know, we saw against England when they were chasing, what was it? A modest total, 240, 250. There was 60 for 4, and they absolutely breezed it because they have their top 8 could all bat in the top 3. But so you have to have a strong batting lineup yourself and keep Australia to not much more than 300 to give yourself a chance. It doesn't sound like a great game plan, does it? It's not going to work. It's going to fail more often than it does work. But we've now got a situation where Australia won't feel safe setting India 330, or even South Africa if Wolfart comes off and, as you say, de Klerk and Tryon go up the order. And they came in yesterday with 85 needed off 10, and you felt the game was already gone by that stage. And I think no one outside Wolfart in the top 6 past 25. Mm-hmm. You had to get down to Dirksen at 7 for a proper contribution there. So, yeah, look, cracks. I mean, there's still a case to be made that Australia are the best team in the world. Now, don't forget they'd won, 15 in a row before that defeat?
Yeah, they'll be fine.
They'll be fine. I'm not going to shed any tears for them. They may win the next World Cup, but at least there's some competitive spirit to it now. And
end of year report, Charlotte Edwards' first stint in charge?
Well, still lots of questions to be answered. I mean, they began with a sort of relatively facile wins against West Indies at home, which didn't really answer any of the questions that had arisen in the previous 12 months. There's that weird treatment of Eccleston, which made it look like they were being ruthless about fitness. I mean, she's come back and she makes the team of the tournament, doesn't she? At the World Cup, still comfortably England's match winner. But in between, England lose at home to India. So they're no longer the second best team in the world. They haven't been for some time. They're arguably now the 4th best team in the world, behind South Africa. And they put all their eggs in the experience basket this time. And it didn't work. Tammy Beaumont can still be destructive, but got 150. Sophia Dunkley's been around for a while, didn't average 15. Alice Capsey, they've invested a lot in, averaged 21. That included a 50 and a lost cause in the semi. Emma Lamb was disappointing. You know, Lauren Bell was disappointing. You know, I think 4 wickets at 45 or something like that in the tournament. So too many of their sort of players they've backed for the last few years failed, and it felt like they were reliant on runs from Siva Brunt, Knight, and wickets from Eccleston. Lindsay Smith did very well. Jones only got, I think, 1.5 century. So too many of their big players failed, and let's be honest, they were slightly lucky to beat Bangladesh. Needed a Heather Knight 100 where she should have been given out earlier in the innings. Would have lost to Pakistan had it not rained. And then the big games, they were probably slightly lucky to beat India, who bottled that chase in the group stage. It was a very unconvincing tournament, and I think there are too many questions for comfort still.
Yeah, I think, and you're right about the wrestling experience. And actually, as much as England's bigger problem is that they're just not producing enough batters to compete with the big teams. You can look at, in particular, I think the Emma Lamb, Amy Jones situation, like you could have flipped those two in the batting order, and I think that batting order actually makes a bit more sense, or at least Lamb deserved a chance as an opener given the domestic season she'd had, and definitely didn't deserve to be just stuck at number 6 where she'd never batted, whereas, you know, Jones as wicketkeeper has done it a little bit, and also has just had so long in international cricket where there's just not been loads to come out of that really, apart from a couple hundreds against a West Indies side who couldn't qualify. So yeah, I think those 3 teams who finish above England will feel a lot more content, although Australia will be disappointed, whereas England, you do wonder. I mean, there's Perrin coming through. You've got, I guess, Mahika Gore, who is young and exciting, but you do wonder who are the players who are going to come through to take them up another level.
Yeah, I mean, it has to start now, doesn't it, really? It has to, you know, it's a 3 or 4 year programme that begins from here on in, really. And obviously the landscape in English cricket is very different now. And while Perrin is an outlier because she's so good, so naturally talented at 18, the question has to be how many more can they unearth over the next few years? And this feels like the starting point, really. They have relied on those names that you mentioned, all of whom now are in their early to mid-30s. And next time round, Tammy Beaumont isn't going to be there. Heather probably isn't going to be there. And, you know, Danny White-Hodge hardly played. She won't be there either. And so it begins now. And there will be talent out there. And this is what Charlotte Edwards insisted was the case when she came on this show back in April, May time. But the hard searches now begin, really. And hopefully we can see a few more talents come through, because it does feel like the transition might not necessarily be particularly smooth. We shall see.
Well, there's plenty more World Cup analysis from Katia, from Lauren Woodford-Hill and from Mark Butcher on this week's Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast, so make sure to go and listen to that. Here it is, the ultimate cricket showdown. Cricket 26 is here, bringing you closer to the game than ever before. Take command in the all-new management career mode, engage in the intensity of the Ashes, and build your dream squad in Pro Team. With enhanced gameplay, smarter fielding, and total control at the crease, every shot, every strategy, every victory is yours. Cricket 26 is available to pre-order now. Step up and make it your moment. On to something that wasn't much of an ultimate cricket showdown, England's ODI series in New Zealand. So since we last spoke, England lost the third ODI in remarkably similar fashion to the first game in particular, losing loads of wickets early and then a bit of recovery and then pushing New Zealand sort of close, but not quite close enough. The stats are really stark in terms of where the issues are. In this series, it was the new ball. So they lost 14 wickets inside the first 12 overs across the 3 games. That's basically half their wickets done inside the first 12 overs. The runs contributed by their top 4 was the lowest ever in an ODI series of 3 or more matches. And then more generally, they go big or they go home, but more often they seem to go home. So this year they've batted first 10 times in ODIs and been bowled out on 7 occasions. But in the other 3, they've made 351, 400 and 414. Only once in ODI history has a team scored more quickly in a calendar year, and that was England in 2019. Jamie Smith has the highest strike rate of any opener in ODI history to have opened as often as him, but averages 26. And it all kind of hinged on Joe Root. He has passed 50 on 7 occasions in 2025, and each time England have made 300. And when he hasn't made 50, they haven't reached 250. And the final stat is that their win-loss ratio in 2025 is 0.36, which is their worst year since 2006. And they are 8th in the world rankings, 10 points off, slipping out of the World Cup qualification spots. Lawrence, why can't England bat?
Any other good news for us? So there are a couple of mitigating circumstances on this particular tour, which is that New Zealand won 3 tosses in very helpful conditions but bowled beautifully, and England batted poorly. I think one of the issues is that they haven't worked out how best to approach ODIs, and McCullum has admitted that. So whereas England are playing ODIs as if they're elongated T20s, the rest of the world over the last few years has kind of worked out that they're more like truncated tests, and they're keeping wickets in hand. It's almost an old school approach, and they're backing their hitters to get 120 off the last 10, and they're getting 320, 330 regularly. England just have not worked out their tempo. And so what we're seeing is too many big shots early on, and then Harry Brook kind of defending that process, saying, well, I'd rather they were caught at deep mid-wicket than nicking to slip. And that, of course, enrages everyone. It sounds like some of the excuses that have been used during the Bazball Test era. They don't take it as seriously either. I mean, I think they can see which way the wind's blowing in a way. It's Test cricket and T20. They just haven't worked it out. And it's a scandal, really, given the quality of the team. You look at that team now and you think there are no excuses anymore. You know, they can't say, as they were able to under Matthew Mott, that they didn't have the best team. They have. They just weren't up to it. And New Zealand were too good. And it's a worry. I think they haven't given up on 50 over cricket, but they're showing no sign at all of getting their heads around it. These are professional cricketers. They should be able to. I mean, Harry Brook, I remember at the 2023 World Cup in India, it was a press conference in Delhi, was saying, yeah, I sort of worked out that I've got more time than I realised. And you're thinking, I could tell you that, and I've never played international cricket. So it's like none of the team has worked out they've got more time than they actually have. And it's, you know, what have they? I've jotted down here, 38.2 overs unused by England in the 3 matches. Now, but going by that series, that's an entire innings gone unused. It's just, I won't say it's not good enough because that makes it sound like a rant and I could do better, but it's been pretty pathetic.
Yeah, I guess what I've been trying to work out, Phil, is whether they think that they are playing the right way but doing it badly, or if they think that actually they need to improve their game plan. Because when Harry Brook says, you know, after that collapse in the first ODI, oh, we just need to go harder, you can think like this team doesn't sound like it's learned their lessons. But then McCullum says after the series, I think when we're confronted with good flat wickets, we're a very, very good cricket team. I think we play a high octane style of cricket and those conditions suit us. When the wickets have a little bit in them and they're a bit more challenging, would that be spin or seam or swing? We probably can't adapt our tempo quick enough. And Brook said after the second game, it's just trying to get through that first period of your innings, the first 15, 20 balls, and you've got to try and cash in from that, which obviously in some ways encouraging to hear. And then you see, you know, Ben Duckett sort of try and hit 1 for 6 in the 3rd or 4th over an innings and instead hits up in the air and gets caught at mid-on. Do you think they will crack it, or do you think we are just going to see a team that keeps on trying to go harder and harder and harder and then it kind of all blazes out?
I thought McCullum's quotes were really interesting after the game, as you've just read out. And it was refreshingly candid and upfront, and it was probably necessary. He's nobody's fool. He would know that Brook's comments, while they have to be put in the context of immediately after a game, he's not one to bewitch you at a press conference. He's a man of few words, but when he delivers them, they're to the point. So McCullum would have realised that sometimes you got to take 1 or 2 on the chin. But I thought his analysis was refreshing, actually. And while there is a disconnect between the way that they play and what he's said, I don't necessarily think that this is over for that approach. I think that there weren't too many people. Perhaps there were. I was certainly excited to see how Jamie Smith would go as an opening bat. But where it needs to be tailored and adapted is he needs to be given the responsibility or the license to do it in a slightly different way depending on the conditions. You know, you can sense with the overheads and the first few deliveries, you can sense as an opening bat what it's going to be for the next half an hour, and you should be given the space to then adapt your game accordingly. What we saw with Smith in the third game, he was a walking wicket. He'd almost nicked off the ball before he got out with a sort of flat-footed, pointless waft. And it felt awkward to watch because clearly he was stuck in this kind of position where he's convinced himself, or perhaps they've convinced him, that this is what you are there for. And so then he's committed to playing like that. And then the chances of you surviving more than 10 minutes in those kinds of conditions are pretty slim. And he's just it's perhaps slightly harsh to identify him in particular, but he seems like the way that he's been playing is doing him less favours than any other player. In the case of Duckett, he's a bit out of form. He nicked a couple playing sensibly in the first 2 games and then clothed the shot that he's been nailing for the last year and a half to get caught mid-on. That does happen. He's earned the right to play the way that he plays. He made 160 against Australia about 6 months ago, or 7 months ago, or whatever, in the Champions Trophy, and one of the best players in the world to go by many judges. So, look, it's painful to watch when it goes wrong, and the parallels feed into the Test team, because when the Test team plays badly, the Test team plays dramatically badly, and when the ODI side plays badly, it plays dramatically badly as well. 130 all out against South Africa a couple of months back, and so on. It's certainly not the percentage way of playing. And if you're looking at a tournament, if you're looking at a like an 8-game 50-over tournament, then playing like that, foot to the floor, one-track cricket, you're going to come unstuck more often than not because conditions are too variable and attacks are too good. So you're going to come unstuck. But I'd hesitate to just dismiss it. I'd hesitate to think that in the 6 or 7 months that McCullum's been in charge and the 5 months, 6 months that Brooks been in charge, that they've already dug their heels into the ground and irrespective of results, this is what we're going to do. I think that, I mean, they'll get sacked if they carry on like that, right? So clearly they're going to try and find a way to adapt and amend. Their talent is such that they're going to be a dangerous cricket team, even if their approach is a little bit askew. If they can temper that approach, if they can find some kind of nuance in there somewhere, that tempo word that Lawrence talks of, they can find a better balance, move on from the Champions Trophy problems where it really became quite evident, and find a slightly different way of doing it. I don't think it requires an enormous flipping, really. There's still some outstanding cricketers, outstanding hitters in that side. But yeah, perhaps there is something as well about the way that they look at the format itself. I remember Joe Root saying to me a year or two ago, well, it's just a slightly longer T20 game. And that's Joe saying it. That's the great Joe Root saying it. And if the most sensible bloke in the room is saying it, then you can imagine how the younger, more impressionable kids are going to be looking at it. If this tour recalibrates their thinking a bit, then there's some benefit to come from it. But in terms of what it means for the Ashes, as everyone likes to talk of, well, a personal view is that it doesn't mean a dime. That's my personal view. I think if you're talking about the consequential results that we've seen in New Zealand for England over the last 12 months, I would say winning a test series down there 12 months ago is more significant for this Ashes series than losing 3-0 in a 50 over 3-match series, personally. And we're 3 weeks away from this thing. And if England had won 2-1, and okay, if they'd held some catches, if one or two things had gone their way in the final game and they'd nicked that one rather than go down by 2 wickets and they'd nicked this series 2-1, no one would give a toss about that. So the same has to apply the other way around. No one's going to give a toss whether they've won a couple or whether they've gone down 3 when it comes down to Perth on that first morning.
Lawrence, do you see it similarly? Do you think this ODI series doesn't have a whole load of meaning for the Ashes?
It's tricky because we were sold this series as the Ashes preparation. Rob Key said it, Richard Thompson said it. This is the Ashes preparation. There'll be a warm-up game against England Lions in Australia, but this is effectively the bit where you get the batsman into some kind of nick. Now, written down the series averages here for some of England's players: Bethell 10, Root 9, Smith 6, Duckett 3. Now, for one of those to have that series would be bad enough. For all 4 of them is a potential problem. Now, I hear what you say about the result, but it's not just the result for me, it's the manner of the result. And if none of them's got any runs under their belt going to Australia, confidence is going to be low. No matter what you say, and no matter how many times Brendan McCullum makes you feel 10 foot tall, whatever the phrase is, they're going to go there with a couple of doubts. And Australia will seize on that. Goodness me, they will have been delighted by what they've seen in New Zealand over the past week or so. It may come down to this point McCullum makes about when the wickets have a little bit in them, blah, 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 we probably can't quite adapt our tempo quick enough. Now, what happens if the Optus Stadium has a bit in it? What are we going to see then? Now, he's trying to draw a distinction between their approach to ODIs and Test cricket, so that in difficult conditions in Test cricket, they adapt. Phil mentioned the Test tour in New Zealand last winter when they were 40 for 3, 40 for 4 regularly, and Harry Brook got them out of trouble with a bit of help from Ollie Pope at 6. I do wonder, incidentally, whether Bethel's failure to get a score on this trip will influence their thinking at all about who goes in at 3, because I think Bethel was a shoo-in, rightly or wrongly, was a shoo-in for the first Test, Perth at 3 before the series. Now he's not got a score. Do they suddenly go, hang on, we better play it safe? Ollie Ollie Pope's a banker for 100 in a first test, isn't it? That's what he tends to do before falling away. So that'll be interesting. So I can't dismiss it entirely. I'd love to. But I do think it's a bit of a problem. This is not the warm-up England wanted. And they're having to do what all sports teams do, which is mould reality to boost their confidence. And there is no other way of doing it, clearly. But they're having to say it doesn't mean anything. Australia, I suspect, will see it differently.
If you actually were 10 foot tall, it'd be quite difficult to bat, wouldn't it?
But you'll be fast bowlers. You have a team of 11 fast bowlers. But
You'd struggle against the Yorker, I think, get the bat down in time.
Yeah. Do we then use the same metric to develop concerns about Travis Head, for example, who's gone 6, 28, 29, 28, 8, 8, 5 in his last 7 limited overs games for Australia?
yeah, but he's one player in a team.
Sure. But the point still stands, right? Does this mean that he is less likely to have an impact when it comes to Perth in 3 or 4 weeks' time? Or is he a pedigree player that has deserved the right to have a lean couple of months? And if that is the case, then clearly the same would apply to Joe Root. The same would apply to Ben Duckett over the last couple of years. The same would apply, obviously, to Harry Brook, who happened to peel off a masterpiece anyway in one of the 3 games.
It depends how much you believe in the question of form and confidence. Now,
and the capriciousness of it.
That's right.
Which flows both ways.
All I'm saying is I think I'd feel, if I were an England fan, I'd feel a bit more confident about seeing some of these guys with runs under their belt going to Australia rather than all of them searching for runs. And who knows what kind of technical issues or gremlins have crept in the last week in New Zealand, and how will that adapt? How will they adapt in Australia? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, Travis Head, I'd probably back to have a good Ashes series. I'd back Joe Root too. I suspect Ben Duckett will. But there are so many questions there that they probably didn't want to be answering at this stage.
And I guess the question as well is about individual narratives across sort of the group loss of form. So with Head, for example, he can be a bit feast or famine. Somehow his overall record still isn't brilliant, even though he seems to be brilliant every time you kind of watch him play, partly because I think he doesn't cash in when he should in these smaller games, but it feels like a massively big game play. I think, World Test Championship finals, World Cup finals, World Cup semi-finals, the Border Gavaskar Trophy, he will just, I think that's why I'd back him. Whereas, say, Ben Duckett, the concern with him is just that it's not just been this series. He kind of hasn't made a run since the start of August, really, since the start of that 100, since the end of that India series. And then you also have these Australia players. You've seen them make runs in Australia before. You haven't with the England players
but
much.
It's funny how it plays out, isn't it? Because if we were looking at a Sri Lankan opening bat who has made all of those runs at international level, right? But he's failed to get a few for his domestic side, and he's had a couple of quiet ODIs. But you look at his Test match output, that's all you're looking at. And if you look at Duckett's Test match output over the last 2 years, from basically, that India series onwards, or maybe further back than that.
From when he was recalled.
From 2022 onwards, if you take that in the round, then that is a very, very dangerous player in the form of his life, right? So I hear what we're saying here, and clearly the more runs you score, the better you feel about yourself. But is what's happened over the last couple of months really going to get under the skin of these players? All I'm saying is I just think we need to just cool our jets a bit, or whatever that expression is, calm ourselves down a little bit. It's a handful of white ball games in wildly seeming conditions, and a few of them have not delivered. And if this really is the great Ashes preparation, where's Zach Crawley? He's been on the tour. He's not even played a game, right? So we have to, I think, keep it in its box. There are problems with this 50-over cricket team, no doubt about it. Does it directly impact on the mood around the Ashes and their chances around the Ashes? For me, not particularly.
On the subject of managing expectations, Lawrence, you wrote an article for the Daily Mail.
And also you wrote one as well, saying,
reasons for England Ashes pessimism. Yeah.
And Katya wrote the all-time list of worst England performances in Australia.
Well, no, she ranked England's last 15 tests in Australia from least to most sort of dispiriting, I think.
13 defeats, two losses. So if we're talking about tamping down expectations,
we've done a fair bit.
Then Wisden is really, really through the roof at the moment.
Yeah, but so because you took issue with that, there was a statement by Stuart Broad on another podcast, I believe.
There's another podcast
saying that Australia's side were the weakest since 10-11 and England's was the strongest in that time. Now, maybe he's talking about just Ashes series in particular, but still, do you think that's a fair assessment, or do you think people are maybe getting a bit carried away with saying, I've heard some pundits say that England are favourites for this series?
Yeah, I think because the last 3 Ashes tours have been so disastrous for England that everyone's reaching back to 10-11 as the natural kind of analogy. History is rarely sort of repeats itself quite so neatly. I mean, I sort of took issue a bit with what Broad said because I brought up England's. I brought up 2013 essentially when Australia arrived in England for the most forgotten Ashes series in history, Ian Bell's Ashes. England win 3-0, statistically their best Ashes series since they won 5-1 in Australia in 78-79 under Mike Brewerley in the World Series era. But because they then went to Australia immediately and got Mitchell Johnsoned 5-0, that 3-0 got forgotten. But that was a pretty fragile Australian team. I mean, Ryan Harris was their best bowler. The other guys, including Siddle, Stark, Lyon, all averaged over 30. Steve Smith was only just coming to the fore. He got his first 100 in England in a dead game, effectively, at the Oval. It was a weak relatively weak Australian side, and I think the England team going into that game into that series was stronger than the current one. I mean, let's look at the current top 7. No matter who bats at 3, Bethell or Pope, 3 of the top 7 will be averaging below 40 in Test cricket. Now that team, 2013, had Peterson, Bell, Root was just coming in, Cook, Trott, Pryor, who didn't have a great series nonetheless. The bowling attack had Swan, Broad and Anderson, who between them took 70 wickets in that series. 3 of them took 70 between them. I think it's a bit of fun, really. I mean, Broad was, people are coming out with statements at the moment that kind of make headlines, and we're all guilty of it. So it's an interesting talking point. But I think what Broad made a sort of more astute point, which was that for England to win in Australia, they have to be very good and Australia have to be very bad. And historically, that is generally true. And that is not the case this time. Mm-hmm. Australia are not very bad. They're pretty damn good, is probably the worst you can say about them, with a couple of issues over their top 3. And England, I'm not sure you could say they're very good. They're a good team with serious potential who could give Australia a scare if things go well. So by Broad's sort of logic, I would say you're looking at an Australian victory in the Ashes. I hope he's wrong.
Australia are in action against India at the moment. They won the ODI series 2-1 and the T20Is are 1-1 as we stand. We'll have more on them next week. We think it's not that long until they announce their Ashes squad and all their big players are playing in this Shield round. So we'll know more where they're at in a week or so.
It's the opening bats, Jake Weatherald or Matt Renshaw, it seems to have narrowed down to those 2.
Yes, with a bit of a wrinkle on if Cam Green can bowl or not, because if he can't bowl, they might be tempted to go Green at 3, Labuschagne opening, Webster at 6, whereas if he can bowl, Labuschagne at 3, Green at 6.
I cannot believe that Labuschagne is going to open the batting, given the form he's in at 3 and how it works for him and for the team at 3. An in-form Labuschagne is the perfect number 3 for the way that they want to play their cricket. Greg Chappell wrote a good thing on this actually on Cricket Info a couple of weeks ago. I'll be shocked if they go that way. If he hadn't started the season so well, Labuschagne, then perhaps take a bob each way and see if opening the batting might help him out. But he's back at 3 now for me, I think. And so it looks to me like it's going to be those 2. And it will be a really interesting little glimpse. We were just talking off air, Lawrence and me, about it, about their thinking and how they are looking to take on this England side. Renshaw is, if you like, the establishment pick, 27 or 8, doesn't have a record to speak of at all at Test level. The average is 27 or thereabouts, certainly in the 20s, but is coming again. He's a better player now. He has more range to his shots. He's back in the ODI side. He's a popular figure. Khawaja bats well with him for Queensland. So he's looking like he might possibly have edged past Jake Weatherald, who started the season quite punctually. But he's a more interesting pick. He's a more daring pick. He's got a bit of a story behind him and almost fell out of the game, but had a stormer last year back in to form. And he's more of a counter-puncher type player, probably a more a daring type opening bat, both left-handers. Be interesting to see how they go. My instinct is that they might pop for Renshaw ahead of Weatherald, but we shall see. And yeah, as I say, I do think it will give us a little clue into how they want to go about their cricket.
Will they revert to dare I say it, conservative type, which not many people think of the Australians as conservative, but I think because of the quality of the players they've had down the years, they haven't really had to address that question too often. They can simply field their outstanding players and win games. But I think we saw 2 years ago in England that they were irritated by the idea that England was suddenly the more interesting, aggressive team. And I think they haven't yet got their heads round that. So yes, Renshaw, I think, would be the conservative pick, and it wouldn't scare England. But it would be in keeping, I think, with the way Australia sometimes lean. They've been quick to... They did give Sam Constas the West Indies series, and he looked so bad, in fairness, that they couldn't really go back to him. But they got overexcited about Constas during the Indies series last winter and talking about him as if no other team had ever tried to attack the new ball. And so that also gave a glimpse into the way they approach these things. Will they have a man at deep point for the first ball like they did at Edgbaston? They kind of they defensively won that first test at Edgbaston, didn't they? And they may think that that's a kind of a model against this England team. So one of the many reasons why playing against England is always it's never dull.
For more on the Ashes, Yas spoke to Michael Vaughan, who was speaking at an event hosted by leading ticket marketplace Viagogo.
When people say Brisbane 2002, the first thing that most people remember is Nasser in the toss. But I want to ask you about you hitting 33 or 36, which isn't a very English strike rate. And obviously, beyond that, you then go on to score 300s that series. How did you land in that position where you decided that's the way you're going to approach taking on that Australia side in their backyard?
I actually look at that first innings, and bizarrely, I had it sent, the 36 balls, just recently. And if you actually look at the innings, it was a scattergun approach. I look back at it, I was as nervous in that test match, probably the most nervous that I've ever been in a test match. It was my first Ashes test. It was in Brisbane. We'd fielded for a long time. I'd fielded badly. I'd dropped a catch. And I went out and about with this big scoreboard. I don't know what Australia got, but it was well into 400s. And I think I was just, I was very nervous, and I went on the attack just to try and prove I wasn't that nervous. And I got into a little bit of a flow, and I played a couple of pull shots. And I think people thought that was my intention, to go out and be really aggressive against Glenn McGrath. It wasn't at that time. My intention was to play the way I've been playing for a year, which was see off the new ball, try and get in. But my adrenaline, the emotions of an Ashes test match, it all felt that little bit different. Everything was very quick, and that was my mindset, everything about the way that I was playing. There's a lot of people make a lot of that 33 as if it was my trigger to what I did in that series, but I didn't have any control. I wasn't playing great. I wasn't leaving the ball. I was just kind of throwing my hands at the ball. Yes, it looked brave. But realistically, it was a little bit of a gamble innings rather than a controlled innings.
How important do you think it is being positive out in Australia? You did have a lot of success, and then also that team in 2005 at Edgbaston scores 400 on the first day. That's, again, not something that you'd associate with English cricket. How important do you think it is being positive against Australia?
Well, I think the most important thing is having the intent to realise that the ball's there to be scored off. So whatever your kind of mindset is, your trigger movements, fundamentally, cricket is about scoring runs and getting a score. I actually look at the kind of innings that I played in Australia, the innings at the Adelaide Oval, then at the MCG, Sydney. They were innings where I think the SCG innings, the second innings of the game, was a bit more aggressive at the start because the pitch was drier, wasn't doing as much, and I got off to a flyer. But, you go to the Adelaide Oval where I got a nice 100, but it was very attritional for the first session. And then suddenly in the afternoon, the sun bakes, the ball gets a bit older. And I think that's when you can capitalise in Australia. And that's not changed. Players that go out and be really aggressive at the top of the order early, I haven't seen too many have a huge amount of success. I mean, David Warner, I guess, is the exception, an Australian player that's managed to do that in Australian conditions. But I haven't seen too many overseas players go out there early and be really aggressive from the get-go, particularly in the first innings when there might be a bit of moisture, the ball just does that little bit more. I've seen some in the second innings when the pitch is dry and you can get on that drive early. Like any innings, you've got to earn the right. And it's understanding as a player what right that is. And it might be that the right is to go early and be aggressive because the ball's not doing a great deal. It might be that the ball's doing plenty. You have to earn the right to be still there after an hour and a half when it gets that little bit easier. Cricket's not a simple game, but the best players in the world seem to assess the conditions better than most, quicker. And that's exactly what England are going to have to do.
So on adapting to conditions, a lot of talk about England's bowling attack and how exciting they are. The batting lineup's really exciting, but very inexperienced when it comes to being in Australia. If you look at the top 7, Root's been there before, Stokes has been there before, but for the rest of them, sure, Crawley's played 3 test matches there, Pope's played 3 test matches there. They don't have loads of experience in Australia. As an English batter, what are the challenges that come with playing in Australia and negotiating the extra bouts? Are there shots that you might play back home that you might park a little bit in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my own experience. I'd had no experience in Australia in 2002-03 and managed to score a few runs. Alistair Cook had a little bit of experience before 10-11. He got over 700 runs. Look, a top 7 with only 100 in Australia, and that's the captain himself. It looks like inexperience, but sometimes, you've got to remember experience is one of 2 things. You can have bad experience, you can have good experience. And the fact that this England side are arriving with not a great deal of negative experience because they haven't really been to Australia, they haven't played too many games in Australia, might be a good thing. I generally always think in Australia, like India as well, the real powerhouses, you have to start well. If you start well and you get on the front foot and you get a score, it's the best place in the world to bat, as is India. If you start well in India, the pitches are true, it's flat, you can play a bit of spin, you can go on and get a huge amount of runs. And Australia is no different kind of bowlers that you have to face. You obviously have to get used to the bounce, the pace, bigger boundaries, playing the short ball. But if you can do that early in a series, you can go on and have a mammoth series as an individual player. I'm not saying that the Ashes will primarily be won or lost in Perth, but you could make a very strong case that England have to win that first test match. And players like Zach Crawley need to score in the first test. Joe Root could do with a big score in the first test. Whoever bats at number 3, Pope or Bethel, I'm guessing it'll probably be Ollie Pope. He'll need to score. The captain himself, Harry Brook, who's not played in Australia. If they can get 2 or 3 of their players getting scores in that first test and get over the line with a victory, I think it'll go a long way to England winning the series. If they don't have a good first test and they struggle and they get blown away, it's that movie that we've seen before.
Watching England go about their business in New Zealand, is that throwing any alarm bells for you? Not collapses happen in cricket. First game, New Zealand bowled brilliantly. After the game, Harry Brooks says maybe we could have gone harder. They go hard in the second game, and it didn't go so well. And you were talking earlier about the nature of Australian pitches. It's unlikely that both sides will get through a series without a collapse. It's almost more important how they react to that collapse.
Yeah, I mean,
does that worry you a little bit?
It worries me that the message always seems to go very consistently over the last few years that when England get bowled out, the message is, we need to go even harder. I'm not 100% sure about that. Fundamentally, it's about winning. And you've got to compartmentalise, the white ball team, and England won't like me saying it, but the white ball team has struggled for a while. They've lost lots of series. Their World Cup defence was poor. The Champions Trophy was poor. T20 World Cup in the Caribbean wasn't great. So you could argue that the white ball team have got an issue. And they do continuously get bowled out when the ball does anything. And if it spins, they get bowled out. If it seams, they get bowled out. Every now and again, like the last game against South Africa at Southampton, they smashed 400. Fantastic. On a flat wicket. On a pitch that laterally the ball's not moving. England are very, very dangerous. My concern is this mindset if we go even harder when the ball's doing something. I've seen England enough in the last few years that when it just nips around a little bit, yes, they're dangerous because you can have 1 or 2 players that come off and create a score that's very competitive, but they can get blown away quickly. And when you've got a Hazelwood, a Stark, a Boland, Cameron Green, they will target that kind of channel, that length. They'll offer the drive. It won't be a half volley. It'll just be on length. Can you throw your hands at that kind of delivery? And on a consistent basis against Cooker in recent times, where the ball's just done a little bit more, I haven't seen too many players have success playing that way. I've seen players have a huge amount of success like India have in recent times in Australia, and they've played the attritional game. They've dug in, they've hung in there, they've batted for a period of time, and they've capitalised in the second innings, either in a chase or when they've got the ball in hand. I really believe that you have to earn the right in Australia. And earning the right means that sometimes you have to go against your natural trait, your natural way of wanting to play, which is the England way, is to get on the front foot and be really aggressive. I'd love to see them just work out for that 20-25 overs, the initial first 25. It's not possible sometimes to attack Josh Hazlewood, but it might be possible after 20 overs. It might be possible to really get after him when the ball's a bit softer, the seam's not quite as prominent, and then you can go. But for the first 20-25 overs, I haven't seen too many teams dismantle this Australian attack against the Kookaburra in Australian conditions. England will have a go. I'm not 100% sure it's the right way of going about it.
Finally, you've watched more of Australia than most Englishmen over the last few years. Where are they at as a test side? A lot of talk about the gaps in the side, that they aren't 100% sure of how they're going to fill them, but at the same time, this is a side that is number one in the world, got to World Test Championship final, won the last one, and full of guys who are all-time greats.
Yeah, I mean, they know how to win. I don't think they blow teams away like potentially other Australian sides have done in the past, but they're very workmanlike. They're aggressive in a different sense, that they will work out the situations. As a batting unit, I think England just need to keep it very, very simple and just challenge the forward defence. The pace element of England's attack might make England go to this short ball theory a little bit early. I'm not convinced that's the way to go against Australia. I've seen teams, and Bumrah's a genius, but I've seen Shamar Joseph get a bag full of wickets in Brisbane 2 years ago, where he just challenged the forward defence. And if you challenge the forward defence, the Australian techniques are quite quirky. They're different. They're not like the old Australian rock solid defence and that forward press that a Ricky Ponting would do. They have a group of players that are very skillful, very different. But if you can challenge them on the forward press, the forward defence on a regular basis, I think you can have success. It's a time in Australia where pace used to be the number one. You needed pace. I'm not 100% pace in your attack, of course, but I think the top of off stump bowler and the team that bowls to hit the top of off stump on the most consistent basis is going to win the Ashes series.
And for even more on the Ashes, here's a snippet of Yaz's revealing interview with Stephen Finn. The full conversation is available on the Wisden Cricket Patreon, and Finn's book, The Ashes Files, is out now.
Are there any guys in that bowling group who you look at their attributes, you look at their traits, and you think, actually, those are really suited to conditions Australia?
Well, most of them, to be honest. I look at Jofra Archer with the way that he angles the ball across left-handers and into right-handers, but the extreme bounce that he gets, and clearly the pace with which he bowls, is something that I think can suit Australia. I look at Gus Atkinson, the way that he bowls predominantly with a scrambled seam and looks to nip the ball, but gets that steepling bounce that I think you need in Australia to be successful. And looking at the pitches that Australia have produced over the last couple of years have probably been more seam friendly than we've seen before. So there will be long, hot, flat days at some stage in the series, but Perth, I think, is a result wicket. Brisbane, a day-night test, will be a result wicket. So yeah, the bowlers who can extract seam movement, I think, will be important. I look at the way that Bryden Carse angles the ball into right-handers, but then gets it to leave away, similar to the way that Hazlewood and Cummins bowl, forcing batters to play. Josh Tongue, we know, can bowl wicket-taking spell. So there's so much to like about this bowling attack, and I think they all do something slightly differently. And Matt Potts is the line and length bowler that England have picked to go out there and perform that role within this series. And he's someone that's probably been underused by England in the last few years. So I'm gushing at the moment because, one, I love seam bowling and I love watching fast bowlers perform well. But I really do think they've assembled a squad of bowlers that are capable of taking 20 wickets.
I wanted to ask you about Josh Tongue, because if you revisit his last test appearance at the Oval against India, it started really difficultly for him. His opening spell, he was struggling to land it on the cut strip at times, 4 byes, 5 wides, spraying it both directions, but in the end performs a really important role in a game that England very nearly win without one of their senior guys in Chris Woakes. And reading your book, it struck me at times almost the similarities between days that Tongue had at the Oval and experiences that you had. And I wonder, do you look at this regime and they look at days like Josh Tongue had at the Oval, and it's almost like, well, that's okay, as long as you do your thing and you are our wicket taker, that's fine. They're going to be days where you go for runs, But we understand that. We understand what you are as a bowler. Do you sometimes look at the current regime and with a bit of envy in that actually that would have really suited your cricket at times?
Yeah, I do actually, but also I would caveat that with the fact that I played in a great team and I've won 3 Ashes. So would I give that up? It's a really hard question to answer. But I do look, and in the book I describe like this bowling utopia that I found in my career sometimes that I wish I'd found more. And it's this feeling of being completely free, where you're at the back of your mark and you just feel completely free to be able to just run in and bowl and be completely attuned to what's going on within the game. And that's not fighting battles within your own head. And I found that at various occasions throughout my career, and I can remember it vividly now what it felt like. But I look at this setup and I wonder how many more times I would have found that mindset if I was playing under this leadership, because I think that they help alleviate the external pressure. And I think that they help take the added intensity and scrutiny away to allow you to go out there and be the best version of yourself, which is something that I craved and loved when I found it throughout my career. So, a long-winded answer to your question: do I think I'd have bobbed more spells like that in an England shirt under this regime? Probably yes.
I think your start to that answer is really important. That was a very, very successful team. And obviously a lot of the stories around that era is more focused on how it ended. But it is worth remembering that's the last time England got to number one in the world. Were there personalities in that group that actually responded really well to that sort of environment? One story from the book that stands out is when you take a sixfer in the Ashes and David Saker, the bowling coach, sort of criticise you in the dressing room after you've just taken a sixfer as a 21-year-old on your Ashes debut. On paper, now you look at that and think that's quite an old school approach, perhaps to a team atmosphere. But were there players in that group who responded actually really well to that sort of pressure? Because as you say, it was an immensely successful England team for a long time.
Yeah, I think when you look at the personalities within that group and the stage that people were in their career, being pretty settled, having had long international careers up until that point and very successful, I think that mindset drove really high standards within the team. And I think that was absolutely necessary. One, to keep people on their toes, to make them not think that they were just going to play every game without thinking about it. But also, it just makes you want to strive and improve to get better all the time. And we shared a common goal. We wanted to win the Ashes and we wanted to get to number one in the world. What happened when we reached that and then what we focused on were probably the wrong things. But up until that point, everyone was aligned in the same direction, wanting to achieve those things, and driving high standards like that in that manner is something that suited the dressing room, even though maybe retrospectively now looking at it as a 21-year-old who was just at the very beginning of his international career, I probably fell outside of that remit slightly. But it sounds so counterintuitive, but I wouldn't change it because I was in there within those four walls of the dressing room when we achieved that. So yeah, I try and tackle those contradictions in the book a little bit, and the way that I was feeling then versus how I feel about it now.
One of the contradictions that I found quite interesting was your realization that at your best there was a free flowingness to your bowling, but to do that, you also need to think about that. You're thinking about not thinking, if that makes sense. And that's just quite a difficult thing to do. Do you think that expectations around you were unrealistic in those early days, both from inside the dressing room, but outside as well? You were a 21-year-old in your early 20s, bowling 90 miles per hour, taking wickets every 50 balls in Test cricket. But at times, there was a lot of focus on your economy rate. It was above 3 rather than below 3 runs and over. If you were bowling at under 3 runs and over, you would have been the best bowler in the world, which is quite an unrealistic expectation for a guy just making his way.
Yeah, and yeah, it's something that at the time it felt right because that's just felt like where I was at in my career, and I felt like I was on this upward trajectory to get to that point. And I'd had challenges, but not significant challenges up to that point in my career. So, yeah, I really embraced that and loved it in those first couple of years of my international career. It was amazing. You just kind of go out there, you'd bowl, you'd feel great, you wouldn't really think about it, and people would always be positive about you. And I suppose that maybe built me up onto a pedestal to then fall quite a long way from. And I wasn't ready for that fall, I don't think, when it came, and wasn't that well equipped with staying level. I think I reference Owen Morgan quite a lot in the early part of the book for his ability to stay level in situations, and that's why he was a fantastic captain. He had a vision, but he also managed to stay level at all times, and he retained that all the way through his career. And if I could have found that mindset or tapped into that mindset a little bit more, I wouldn't have had to ride the highs and lows as extremely as I did. So, yeah, certainly being built up in that way by the press and by myself, and that is something that you're not that equipped to deal with at that age. But also sort of partly my personality flaws as opposed to anything else.
With under 3 weeks to go until the first Ashes test, excitement is building towards the biggest series in a generation. The MCG hosts the Boxing Day Test, one of the standout events in the cricketing calendar, showcasing Melbourne as a gateway to Victoria. Melbourne is Australia's sporting and events capital, regularly playing host to some of the world's biggest international sporting events such as the Grand Prix, Australian Grand Slam, the Australian Open, the NFL, and the 150th anniversary test in 2027. If you're heading to Australia this winter, find out more on what Victoria has to offer by going to visitmelbourne.com, and that link will be in the podcast description as well. Bit of news from the 100. The 100 will have an auction next year. Squad sizes would increase from 15 to 18, and the overseas allocation will move from 3 to 4, and that's in the 11 as well as in the squad.
Good move.
The first auction, at least, will be effectively a mega auction, with each team having at most 4 spots in their squad confirmed before it takes place. Lawrence or Phil, we knew this was likely, but this is still kind of the first sign of those new openers, of those new owners stamping their mark and kind of IPLifying the 100. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is, and I think the 100 have just kind of the 100 as a competition has just let it happen. They've accepted this as the way forward. This is how white ball franchise competitions work. You may as well. You can't be against them. You've got to be with them. And frankly, that's what the 100 is doing. That's how it's going to be a success. It's already got the money in. Now it's going to go full proxy IPL, and the devil take the hindmost.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I like it. I like that there'll be extra space for overseas players. That a more sort of diverse and cosmopolitan tournament is a good thing for me. That's why the other ones work well when there's a real sprinkling of different nationalities in that 11. I guess increasing the squads to 18 means that you're taking even more players away from the 50 over tournament that takes place. Coincides, of course, notoriously with the 100. But I just think the cat is out the bag on that, and you're not going to get him back in there. So I think ultimately it makes the tournament a little bit more watchable, a little bit more intriguing, and I struggle to think that's a bad thing ultimately.
Yeah, and I know that the mega auction side of things, sort of the ripping up of all the squads, there was a bit of concern about, especially from the Oval Invincibles having built this kind of team. But I think that's also sort of necessary and unavoidable. I think if you spent 50 million or whatever on Welsh Fire, you don't want to be stuck with the players that have been chosen for you by someone who didn't have a huge amount sort of invested in it. So I think that makes sense as well. But it is just, we're now seeing what this thing is going to look like. Yeah.
And the IPL's kind of shown that we all raised these questions at the start. Is there going to be any real affinity between fans and the teams they support? Well, it's kind of, the IPL has proved that doesn't matter a great deal. They're supporting the jersey, and they're actually, we've discussed this before, there is a bit more tribalism in the 100 than a lot of us gave them credit for. You look at replica shirt sales and so on. So, they're throwing all their eggs in that basket, and I suspect it will probably work.
Could I just add, Ben, press release came through this morning from the MCC, a bit of good news for English cricket, that over 1,000 teams will compete in the first iteration of the Knight Stokes Cup this upcoming summer. The Knight Stokes Cup being a knockout tournament for secondary state schools. And over 1,000 teams will compete in it. 750 schools have entered in. And so those numbers are pretty encouraging, to say the least, because as we know, getting state schools full stop to play cricket is challenging enough, but state school secondaries is even more so. So that's something to be cautiously optimistic about, I would say, and fair play to the MCC Foundation in particular for getting that set up in the first place. A bit of good news on a Monday morning.
And then just one thing to wrap up from around the world in cricket. Pakistan have won a T20I series against South Africa 2-1. I guess the standout story there is Salman Mirza, who's a 31-year-old seamer who made his professional debut all of 4 years ago, so when he was a 27-year-old. He's played 6 first-class games in total, all of which have been played in Zimbabwe. He's only ever played 6 PSL games, but this is his 7th T20I. His T20I numbers right now are very good. And yeah, that's just that Pakistan thing, isn't it? Just when everything seems to be crumbling apart, they find a 30-year-old fast bowler who's seemingly never played before, and he goes and helps them win a series. But that is that's some cricket that's happened. Phil,
that should be the end point of every single thing that we do. Yeah. That's some cricket that happened.
Well, yeah, something that's not cricket that's happened, but that is something we should talk about is the new magazine, Phil, which is out this week. Big Ashes special preview. You happy with it?
Am I happy with it? Yeah, I am actually. Joe Harmon McGowan describes it as an Ashes bonanza.
Good.
So there you go. More than 30 pages of Ashes coverage featuring Yaz's trip up to Yorkshire to meet Joe Root, my chat with Mark Wood, all the teams, players, squads profiled, of course, a bit of nostalgia in there. Richard Whitehead looking back at the Typhoon Tyson series of 54-5. Jeff Lemon picks out, in his own beautiful style, the most notorious fast bowling spells in Australia. That kind of land of heat and fire, and he does it in his own brilliant style. Damien Fleming gives us the lowdown on the 5 pitches. How much more pitch talk can we have? Well, the answer is a lot more, folks. And Damien Fleming is really useful on that, actually, and very insightful. You've done a piece on the fast bowlers.
Yeah.
Now, explain what this is, because it's a very good piece. Explain what the brief was and what your analysis on England's pace attack threw up.
Well, I guess it was sparked when we were talking about it, saying what are the points of discussion ahead of the series. And there is a lot of talk about England's batting and, how that approach will go in Australia. And there's been a sense that people think the bowling is almost like taken care of. Even Broad, when he's talking about who will, whether England are better prepared this time, a lot of that he seems to think is based on the bowling, which is an interesting thing for him to say, given that he has been part of the last several bowling groups to go to Australia. But that seems to be sort of broadly accepted across what people are generally saying. And that's when you just think just in the abstract that since the last Ashes, Anderson and Broad, who some people would put as England's 2 greatest ever, have retired. That is an interesting state of affairs. And also when you look at how inexperienced the bowling group is as a whole. So obviously Stokes has played a fair amount, but after that, Wood has played 30-odd test matches. It's the first time they've not had a frontline quick with 50 tests since the 90s. And then even after Wood, no one's played even 20 tests. And even then their raw numbers are not great. So Atkinson has this brilliant set of numbers, but then I think it's only Potts and only by a tick who averaged under 30 from the rest of them. So it's kind of trying to unpick this notion of why people might be saying that. And I think obviously partly it's just the pace thing where they have average speeds that are higher than England generally have when they go to Australia. But then also this sense that maybe they're more rounded than they have been before. It's not that they're going with 4 or 6 right arm medium fasts. It's that they're going with, someone who can take the new ball and be good against this type of batter and someone who can sort of complement in that way. And then to also look about how that will fit together. And I think there is something in it for sure. Like it's obviously certainly the average speeds thing, but also you look at that there is something different that all the bowlers do. But I also think that, as we're discussing with, is it, sort of trying to be optimistic, or is it based in pure reality? And there's a bit of like talking up a bit more than you might otherwise would.
You say that, however, the message that you sent me on the 27th of October got some data through now. Definitely a sense that Australia's bowlers are better than England's in basically every single way.
Exactly, yeah, that's the thing. And also that like what's slow for England is not, what's slow for Australia is not slow for England. So I got some numbers through from CricViz on average speeds, and you've got Scott Boland, who's seen as this line and length medium pacer, so this English style bowler. And then you've got Bryden Cass, who's a sort of like tear away, who might be a bit loose but will get you a few. And then Bryden Cass's average speed is just under 1 kilometre per hour quicker than Scott Boland's, so they're almost the same pace. And then so Scott Boland's 134.9 kph. He's faster than Gus Atkinson, way faster than Matty Potts, who's sort of the touch point in the England attack. Pat Cummins, who we think of as being like very quick enough, but not always in that express pace bracket. And then Jofra Archer, who people will think of as one of England's fast ever this nice mile per hour guy, and Pat Cummins' his average speed is just a bit quicker than Archer's, and the channel how much Australia get it in a good line and length is better than England's. England do move it slightly more, but I think the sense is that it's a very, very good Australia bowling attack, whichever way you slice it, but that maybe England can be greater than the sum of the parts. So Archer, I think, is especially key because he's the one of the seamers who has got a significantly better record against left-handers than right-handers, and Australia will probably have 4 left-handers in that top 7. So if he can do a number on Khawaja, Weatherall / Renshaw, Carey, and who's the other one? And Travis Head. Yeah, if he can do a number on them, and then the rest of them can sort of cobble together Steve Smith somehow and Labuschagne, then maybe there's something there that can nick a test or two. But I also think that it is just just that Australia attack. You can just forget just quite how good it is, and that's what Joe's done as well, hasn't he? He's looked at that sort of group of bowlers as being somewhere in Test cricket history is one of the best ever.
That's right, and also we forget Nathan Lyon in all these discussions.
Exactly,
we're always talking about the seamers, and because England's spin options are so questionable. I'm sure Bashir's averaging 39 as a Test cricketer, done very well in some ways, but you wouldn't expect him either to keep control on Australian pitches or run through them. Whereas you've got Nathan Lyon has got approaching 550, something like that, 550 Test wickets, an all-time great. So England they're up against it.
Phil, among the many excellent things in the magazine, I'd say that the piece I probably enjoyed the most was you on Ian Botham, and particularly on one of his innings which you picked out as having, is it changed the Ashes or explained the Ashes?
Explained the Ashes.
So you're picking out 12 innings that explain the Ashes, and you've gone hipster, haven't you, for your Botham choice?
I don't think it's hipster. I was going to go for his 18 in 7 balls at Edgbaston in 1985. That would have been hipster. So anyway, look, very briefly, the idea is to try and pick out innings that capture something of the essence of the thing rather than the definitive Ashes hundreds or whatever. And I've got a few up my sleeve that will definitely fall into the hipster category, but I'm not going to give them away yet. So I went for Botham's final 100, his last great howl of protest, as I put it, in suitably overblown terms. 14th and final 100, the 80s mullet thing, the spinal tap hair, really, really running free by this point. The salad days have turned a bit puff pastry by that stage. He can't really get his away swinger out there, but they all turn up on that tour. Famous Martin Johnson quote that doesn't even need repeating, but basically they were a wreck of a team. They'd won literally no Test matches in 10 in the build-up to it. They'd changed captains. Gatting took over. Botham rocked up, having played a practice game a week before that, walked out without his bat because he was so profoundly hungover. Border wins the toss, inserts England on day one, and he makes 138 on the second morning. Just a wild knock, really. And it's his last ever great performance with the bat in Test cricket. He played for another 5 years without touching that level again. But I try and take it back all the way to the Botham early days, 1974, when he made that 45 not out for Somerset, when Andy Roberts smashed his teeth in, on the same weekend that Boycott played his last game for 3 years. So Boycott pulled away, the great sulk, and Botham emerged on the same weekend. And so I tried to tie those stories together. Greg Chappell is a figure throughout it as well. Trying to just get a sense of the vast absurdity of the Ashes, this vast tapestry, if you like, of stories. Whether I pulled it off or not, I don't know. But thanks for your kind words, Ben. I appreciate that. And anyway, more of that nonsense to come. But elsewhere in the magazine, obviously it was the end of the county season, and so I went up to speak to Peter Moores in a coffee shop in Nottingham. Sam Dallings reported on Leicestershire's extraordinary year. Joe's picked his Championship 11 of the summer. Cashier Whitney reflects on the first summer for the women's cricket domestic schedule. Looking at Lancashire in particular, who won the double, of course. Andrew Miller talks a lot about Taylor Swift in his piece and how she should have been the saviour of English cricket. It's been a fallow month. John Stern pays tribute to the late, great Dickie Bird. Sonny Baker reports as our diary writer of the month from New Zealand. And Lawrence Booth, seated just here, takes on Indo-Pac nuclear tensions. Just another month.
Taylor Swift, Indo-Pac nuclear tensions.
That's what you get
was
with
a toss-up.
WCM.
That's true. Which sort of legion of fans was you less likely to be on the receiving end of online?
And anyway, 30 seconds or less. Can you summarise what
well,
your piece?
it was inspired by India's refusal to shake hands with Pakistan at the recent Asia Cup in the UAE and the potential ramifications for world cricket. Forget the rights and wrongs of what happened in the Gulf. If India take this to a logical extreme and start refusing to play Pakistan full stop, not just not shake their hands, what will that mean for the global game? I argue that it's bad news because, as we all know, broadcasters pay 10 more times for the adverts in an Indian-Pakistan World Cup game than they do for any other match. That feeds into the global pot that the other teams get little handouts from each year. If West Indies aren't getting their 4.5 million or whatever it is from the IPL, from the ICC, that spells serious trouble. So this isn't having a go at India. This is a concern about where the health of the global game if India refuses to play Pakistan, which I think we're getting to a position which
Feels like the end game.
feels like it could be happening if Narendra Modi remains in power for any length of time.
So wisdensubs.com if you're interested in getting hold of the magazine, either in print form or in digital form. So I've got both options for you. A year's subscription is 40 quid, minus a penny, and you get your first issue for free. So all of that good stuff you'll get for free. So various different options at wisdensubs.com. Go along if you fancy getting involved. And the digital offering is considerably cheaper. It's a more interactive service. You get videos embedded in there. You get me reading certain articles, giving it the big ham actor as best I possibly can. It's all good stuff, as you know, and you would expect me to say that, but it damn well is.
No, it's a really excellent issue this month. So
thank you, Ben.
If you're going to get on board now.
Not with the mediocre issues. Get on board with this one, the really good one.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Well, that is all from us for now. As I say, do listen to this week's women's podcast well because it is an excellent debrief. Lauren and Butch both well worth listening to on that final. And make sure you subscribe to the Patreon because there's loads and loads of excellent stuff on there as well. Cheers.